It's going to be an absolutely huge show. There is so much to talk about. I have not been here in about a month, so we've missed many debates, discussions, major significant news, and today, of course, was Inauguration Day. So tonight we're going to be covering a lot. Our featured story tonight, of course, we will be talking about the inauguration ceremony for the second term of President Donald Trump. Sort of surreal and unbelievable that I'm even saying that. I was telling people earlier today during my stream, I started this show about 2 weeks after Trump's first inauguration, 8 years ago. And it was so long ago, I was actually doing my show on RSBN, which you might have heard of, Right Side Broadcasting Network. It was so long ago that when I was doing this show back in 2017, I distinctly remember if I called Trump anything other than President Trump, all the boomers at RSBN would freak out. Like it was a problem. I remember I had to train myself over the course of weeks because every show the comments would say, why won't he say President Trump? It's President Trump. And it's surreal now, 8 years later, it's nearly a decade, my entire adult life. And here we are again, the beginnings, the pomp and ceremony, the first 100 days. President Trump, he's back. So it's kind of unbelievable, but we will be talking about the inauguration ceremony. We're going to talk about, in particular, the executive orders. I already did a stream today reacting to the inauguration, so I'm not going to say too much about the actual swearing in and speech. But tonight, we're mainly going to talk about the executive orders which have been signed since the ceremony. And it seems that there's been 3 or maybe 4 stages. He has done 3 public signings of executive orders, one immediately after the swearing in, which appeared to be procedural for the most part. He signed more at Capital One Arena in front of a crowd, and then he signed more at the White House. And each of those were televised, although most likely, he has also been signing executive orders off of the camera as well. So we're going to go over the executive orders that he signed. We actually don't know all the details about what is in them. We don't know how many he signed today, but we have a pretty good idea of what's in most of them. And it's sort of a mixed bag. So far, so good. I will say the one executive order for me, one of the most anticipated for others, was the commutations and pardons of January 6 protesters. And I have to say, it is pretty remarkable. He has pardoned nearly every single January 6 protester, all but 14. So that's nearly 1,600. And I guess that does not include pending cases. I imagine maybe those will be addressed moving forward. But out of nearly 1,600 capital defendants, all but 14, and that includes Enrique Tarrio, that actually includes Stuart Rhodes, who is having his prison sentence commuted. They have been pardoned or had their prison sentences commuted, which is huge. And I commend the president. I'm actually surprised. I assumed that perhaps hundreds would be left in the cold based on what we were being told. They said that violent offenders would not be pardoned. It would be a case-by-case basis. And so to me, that sounded an awful lot like they were getting ready for an executive order that people wouldn't be very happy about. But I'm very pleased about that one. So that's huge. But there have also been executive orders on energy, inflation, DEI, gender, immigration, trade, a host of other issues. We're going to cover all of it tonight. We're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of issues that took place during the presidential transition. This is my first show since December 23rd, 2024. So I have taken an unusually long break. It's the longest that I have gone without doing a show in the 8 years I've been doing the show. So I'm not going to cover everything, but I do want to cover, at least briefly, the H-1B visa debacle, which took place around Christmas and New Year's Eve. And then I'd also like to talk a little bit about the Gaza ceasefire deal, which was announced last week, at the end of last weekend. And we'll talk about the details of the deal and whether or not it will be successful. And then, even further, I'd like to talk a little bit about Trump's first 100 days and what we can expect in the very near future, the initial challenges and maybe policy directives that we're going to see. And we'll talk about what this next 100 days and next 4 years is going to look like. So it's going to be a packed show. There's a lot to get into, things that I've missed, a lot that has happened today. And then we have to talk about where all of this is headed. So it's going to be a pretty full show. Lock in, because it's going to be a long show. There is a lot of ground to cover. But before we start, I just want to say it is good to be back. I have taken an extended leave after all of the craziness immediately after the election. As you know, right after the election, I posted a tweet, "Your body, my choice." All-time great tweet, definitive, historic, like the defining tweet of the election. It was unbelievably huge, over 100 million impressions. But it also led to harassment and assassination attempt at my house. And so things got a little crazy there for a minute, but hey, knock on wood, I am alive, I'm healthy. Things seem to have calmed down, knock on wood. Hopefully it stays that way. So I took a little break, and I had been planning a vacation anyway. It kind of put a damper on things to almost get shot at my residence, but I did enjoy a little bit of time away from the show. But I said this earlier today, it is really good to be back with you. I need this show. I need this movement. I realized I've been doing this for so long. I mean, and I said this earlier, I've never taken more than a week off from my show at any given time in over 8 years, nearly 8 years. And so being away for so long, I didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. It was good to recharge my batteries a little bit, but I am very glad to be back, and I appreciate everybody tuning in this afternoon and tuning in tonight. And I am back now, so I'm going to be live, as always, every weeknight at 8 o'clock Central Time. I know I was a little late tonight. I wasn't feeling so good in the middle there. I got a little sick after the inauguration, but hey, you know what? It's a new year. We're going to lock in, and in 2025, this is going to be an on-time show. For real this time, 8 o'clock every night. So it's good to be back. But remember to smash the follow button here on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. And with that, we're going to dive in because we really do have a lot of ground to cover. So first things first, I actually do want to talk about some of the things that happened during the transition that I didn't get too much time to talk about because I wasn't here. If you follow me on social media, I have written extensively about these issues. I've actually participated in spaces on X talking about these things, and it may already feel like ancient history, but I do want to address them. And it's important to address them because these two issues actually foreshadow the big issues of this entire second term. So we're going to go over the history a little briefly, but it's important to cover because it signals a lot about where this administration is going to go and where it's headed very quickly. So the first issue that I want to get into is the H-1B visa scandal. This is something I did not get to cover on my show. It took place a little bit after my last show, which took place just before Christmas. And if you guys have been active on X, if you've been following my Telegram, if you've been following the news, this was one of the biggest stories of the presidential transition. And the transition I'm referring to is the period between the election of Donald Trump in November and the inauguration of Donald Trump, which took place earlier today. They call that the transition because it transitions from one president to the next. And one of, in my opinion, the most important events of that period took place around Christmas and New Year's 2024, and that was a major public spat between Elon Musk, the major and top individual donor of the 2024 election, and Trump's base. Trump's base of conservative, America First supporters, and even some of his more vocal influencers on social media, like Steve Bannon and Jack Posobiec and others. And the substance of the debacle was over this temporary work visa program called the H-1B. And H-1B has been very controversial for a very long time. What it is, in effect, is subsidized labor for corporations. There's a cap every year of 50,000 of these temporary work visas, and they go out to employees, they go out to foreign nationals, mostly from India, that come here, and there is a special accommodation made for them because they have specialized knowledge. That's the basis of the program. Every year, 50,000 of these people are brought in under a work visa. Most of them work in IT, they work in Silicon Valley, they work in tech. And again, most of them are coming from India. And the premise is that they are imported into the country to benefit our economy because they have specialized knowledge. The truth is, they actually do not possess any kind of special knowledge. And although there are certain provisions that in theory are supposed to protect American workers from being undercut by these work visas, in reality, there are many loopholes that corporations use to circumvent those restrictions. And what this is, in effect, and it has been called this even by neoliberal economists, is subsidized labor. These are cheaper, younger, more poor employees from foreign countries that have a much lower standard of living, and they're brought in for one purpose. They can be hired more cheaply than American workers. Younger, cheaper, poorer, from a country with a lower standard of living, and they're brought here to reduce the overall labor cost of major firms. And there's a great comparison to be made. If under previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, they had been importing illegal immigrants, border jumpers, asylum seekers, so-called refugees, people from Mexico, Honduras, Venezuela, if that was one category of migration, economic migration that was being imported, and we understand that those unskilled category of economic migrants were being brought in to work in agriculture, to pick berries. They were being brought in to work on farms or work in the service industry. If that is one class of economic migration that was imported to undercut the wages of one class of labor, which is unskilled labor, then this is very much the same thing, except that this is undercutting a different kind of labor. This is undercutting a more skilled form of labor. And it's coming from a different continent, and it's coming through under a different program. But you understand that whether it's illegal or legal, nominally, whether it is low skilled or high skilled nominally, whether they're coming from Latin America or Asia, whether they're contributing to our country or not, paying taxes or not, all of this is really arbitrary. What this represents is economic migration, which is to say, vast numbers of people are being brought here to work. They are being brought here to work for massive firms because they will work for less money. They are imported cheap labor, and they're being brought in for the sole and exclusive purpose of taking American jobs. That's what it is. Whether they're Guatemalan and working on a farm, whether they're Indian and working in Silicon Valley, again, legal or illegal, low skilled or high skilled, that is their purpose. That is their effect. That is what it is. This became a major controversy in this election. Maybe before the election, it should have been a controversy. It was certainly talked about before the election. I was talking about it. Trump was talking about it. But it did not spill over into the public and become a very scandalous row until Christmas. And like I said throughout the election, this is something that was said back in June of 2024 by President Trump. He reiterated it many times in August and then in the fall before the election. Trump campaigned in 2024 on expanding these work visa programs. He specifically said that we would increase legal immigration. And although he didn't give a ton of specifics, he did say one thing in particular, which is that we would staple green cards to the diplomas of every foreign student that graduates from an American degree program. And that means, by the way, we're not just giving them a work visa. A green card means permanent residency. So the one specific proposal outside of generally bring in more legal immigrants, he said we would be giving permanent residency to the millions of foreign students that are studying here. And by the way, he said in any degree program, not just a 4-year program, not a PhD program, not a specialized graduate program or a certification. He said any degree program, even as low as a 2-year program, like an associate's degree. That's like community college. So he said that he would potentially open up the floodgates to legal immigration through the universities. And again, not work visas, full-on immigration, receiving residency, and ultimately a pathway to citizenship. This is something that has been done in Canada. It has been done in Australia, and the result is the same. A significant percentage of their population comes from foreign students that receive residency. And there are 1 million foreign students studying here now. If a policy like that went through, there would be millions more because a degree program would become a pathway to residency inside the United States, which is a very valuable commodity. So this is something that was telegraphed long in advance. And if you watch the show, I warned about this throughout the election, and I tried my best to bring attention to it. But people reassured the voters on social media. I'm sure they were paid by the Trump campaign or they were paid in other ways. But influencers, allies of the president, surrogates for his campaign, they were probably paid on social media throughout the election to reassure the base and the voters that Trump's commitment to staple green cards to diplomas was not a serious proposal, that he wasn't serious when he said it, he wouldn't follow through on it, that it was actually not a part of his policy. And yet, after the election, around Christmas, this became a major issue. Trump has begun appointing all sorts of czars and other mid-level people in the White House from Silicon Valley. He's drawing from a pool of allies of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and other major donors to his campaign or previous donors to previous campaigns to staff the administration in roles pertaining to technology, specifically AI, cryptocurrency, among other things. One of these appointments was an Indian who was brought to the United States from India to work for Microsoft on one such category of these work visas. Very quickly, he was fast-tracked to become a naturalized citizen of the United States. He was an ally of Mark Andreessen, who was the 10th biggest individual donor in the cycle. Mark Andreessen is a venture capitalist from the firm Andreessen Horowitz. We've talked about him a lot on the show. And his ally, a guy named Sriram Krishnam, was appointed to a mid-level position in the administration back in December. And it came to light after his appointment that he had previously spoken out in favor of unlimited legal immigration into the United States. And there has been some debate about what exactly he said and whether he was specifically talking about H-1B. But it was clear that he, like others in Silicon Valley, was in favor of expanding these work visa programs that are effectively designed to undercut American labor. And I actually consider it a good thing that this provoked a very strong response from the base. After his appointment and his comments were brought to light, many Trump voters and Trump influencers began to speak out against the Silicon Valley oligarchs who are now entering government. They're securing important appointments that will have policy enforcement power over the most important sectors of the economy, specifically tech, and specifically their problematic views about legal immigration. In response to this, and this is maybe the thrust of the show here tonight, we have seen a crackdown and an aggressive response, not only from Silicon Valley, but in particular from Elon Musk, that we have never seen before. And I'll read to you two tweets in particular from Elon Musk. This is during Christmas, during New Year's. It has been brought to light that maybe all of these tech appointments are not 100% aligned with MAGA on the issue of legal immigration. The MAGA base is outraged. They're speaking out. They're condemning the policy. This is what Elon Musk had to say in response to the outrage. He said regarding those people that oppose H-1B, quote, "Those contemptible fools must be removed from the Republican Party root and stem." The contemptible fools I'm referring to are those in the Republican Party who are hateful, unrepentant racists. They will absolutely be the downfall of the party if they are not removed. These are the people that spoke out against H-1B. And in particular, the proposal for H-1B is to open up the caps so that there's no longer 50 or 70,000 H-1B visas per year, but rather perhaps an unlimited number or double or triple the annual cap that is established now, and removing any restrictions on national origins, meaning that we would get more Indians. Not only would we get more H-1Bs overall, but a greater proportion of them would come from India. And when Republicans said, this is not what we voted for, although it is, I hate to tell you that, but that is actually what you voted for. Republicans said that's not what we voted for. Maybe it's contrary to the spirit of what we voted for. It's not America first. It's not buying and hiring American. It's not putting American workers first. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who gave $277 million to Trump's campaign. He owns X, which is how we all have a platform. He said that anyone that opposes the program is a contemptible fool, a hateful, unrepentant racist who will be the downfall of the Republican Party if they're not removed root and stem. Then he went further and he said, the reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H-1B. So if you think there's any ambiguity on this, there isn't. He said, take a big step back and fuck yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. That's a quote. That is a quote from the richest man in the world. That is a quote from the top individual donor of the 2024 election by a margin of $200 million, or I should say roughly $100 and some million. That is Elon Musk to Republican opponents of H-1B. And it gets better. After those remarks, he banned 15 top Groyper accounts permanently, including Pine Sap, who is a Catholic apologist, including Bookcat, who runs a book club, including many of the Clippers who post clips edited of this show, like Ray and Kaiserev and Classics Groyp. But in total, 15 major Groyper accounts were permanently suspended. 7 high-level influencers who previously had criticized Israel throughout the Gaza war, and the 7 are Dr. Lupus, Jake Shields, Sam Parker, Myron Gaines, Suleiman Ahmed, Stu Peters in 1984, had their verification removed, X Premium suspended, and all of their features removed. And then, after that, Elon claimed to be pursuing algorithm changes that would penalize negativity on the platform. And I can presume that means negativity against Elon's regime, Elon's policies, his politics. And so this was the shocking, ominous, disturbing reversal that took place before the Congress and the president were even sworn in. This is arguably one of the most powerful private individuals in the world, certainly in the United States. The richest, owning some of the most important companies in the world, in our country, the top individual donor. The president really owes him. Declaring war aggressively, calling everybody who opposes him a hateful racist that must be annihilated from the party, telling them to F themselves in the face because they don't support this subsidy. They don't support a work visa program that he himself has benefited from personally and now benefits from professionally in his role at his various companies. It was a very dark end to 2024. And it signals something. Again, I'm not just talking about ancient history from a month ago. I'm not talking about how I was right throughout the election. This is about the next 4 years. And this is a tension between Silicon Valley and its extremely ultra-wealthy oligarchs who have now suddenly joined up and bandwagoned onto the Trump movement. They donated vast sums of money during the election. They donated vast sums of money to the inaugural committee. They were present at the inauguration. There is a tension between these oligarchs and their financial and political interests and the political base of the Trump movement, which has supported Trump for the better part nearly of a decade, and specifically support America First immigration and labor and trade policies. And the tension is this: Silicon Valley is not right-wing. They are not nationalist. They are not Christian. They are not traditional. They are not conservative. They are not nationalist on the economy. They are not nationalist on foreign policy. They are not conservative on social issues. They're not conservative on identity issues. Many of them are not even American. Many of them are not heterosexual. None of them are Christian. Many of them, as a matter of fact, are Jewish with significant ties to Israel. And yet, they have joined up with the Trump movement and become extremely influential in the Trump government. And that includes, by the way, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who is a protege of Peter Thiel, a tech oligarch from the PayPal mafia who has been historically aligned with Elon Musk, David Sachs, and others from the Silicon Valley world. On the other side is Trump's political base, people like you and me. And we supported Trump in 2015 and 2016 because Trump said America first, buy American, hire American, because Trump is a nationalist. And so this sets up a clash on one particular issue, which is legal immigration, where the demands and the needs of the elites of Silicon Valley, of the richest men and the most valuable companies in the world with an insatiable appetite for cheap labor from India and the third world, is set against the base, which wants to close our borders to all categories of economic migrants, skilled, unskilled, Latin American, Asian, tech or agriculture. And this is one issue among others. And that's why this is so important to discuss right now. And I am actually very pleased to tell you this. I would say I hate to say it, but I'm actually very pleased and I'm very happy and very smug saying this. But I would like to deliver the mother of all I told you so's. I told you so to every Trump shill, every Trump supporter, everybody that called me a closeted Democrat for arguing about legal immigration, H-1Bs, immigration moratorium before the election when the voters had the leverage. I told you so. This was not a surprise. You did vote for this. You could have seen it 6 months away. You could have seen it miles away from outer space, from the International Space Station. It was transparent. It was obvious. It was in your face. They were telling you explicitly. And yet, the voters believed paid surrogates of the campaign. Elon Musk was paying the campaign hundreds of millions of dollars. People that were being paid to post on X by him were telling you, it's not a big deal. Trump doesn't mean it. It's not going to happen. And you believed it. Trump said, we're going to staple green cards to diplomas. And people that are paid by Elon Musk and the Trump campaign and Republican surrogates said to you, don't worry about that. Just vote anyway. Oh, he didn't really mean that. He reposted it over and over, reiterated it in many press conferences. And they said, it's not a big deal. And people believe that. Well, I hope next time around, 2026, 2028, people are a little more hip. And I can tell you, maybe you feel surprised. A lot of people actually did text me after this happened and said, you were right. I'm sorry. I should have listened. You would think that after this, it would never happen again. You would think after this stunning reversal, after this stunning betrayal, these strong words from Elon, F yourself in the face, unrepentant, hateful racists, you would think after such an ominous pivot from such a powerful person, you would think that this mistake could never be made again, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. But it will, because the same thing happened 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, because it has happened all before. That is why it is important to have a long memory. So in 2026, as sure as they're telling you today, in the midterms, there must be accountability. We have to primary them. In 2 years' time, they will be telling you, you must hold your nose and vote Republican because Trump needs the majority. We have to hold the line, and you may not like it, but what are we going to do? Let the Democrats take control? We have the slimmest majority. As sure as you are watching me here right now, if you look at yourself and realize you exist, in 2 years, they will be saying that. In 4 years, they will be saying the same thing. That's why it is important to remember and to pay attention. But anyway, so this H-1B debate shows the fissures and the cleavages inside the Republican Party. And by the way, as I have hinted at, this shows you something even bigger, which is that our society is changing. Our elites are changing. Our elites are now the Silicon Valley overlords, those that you saw in attendance at the inaugural today. Sundar Pichai, Tim Cook, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, from Google, Apple, Tesla and SpaceX, Amazon and Facebook, or Meta. These are the people that now run our country. That was a combined $1.2 trillion. $1.2 trillion between like 6 guys in private wealth that was in attendance there. Collectively, they run or own the trillion-dollar companies listed in the stock exchange. Meta, Tesla, Google, Amazon, Apple, these are trillion-dollar companies, the most valuable companies in the world, and they happen to lord over the most important industries in the world. And they will only increase in importance as time goes on, in particular as they explore and invest in artificial intelligence. And we see the emergence of an artificial general intelligence and then potentially an artificial superintelligence. This is the future. And there is a very pivotal and important question before us, which is this. When you see these liberal immigrants from Silicon Valley at Trump's inauguration, the question is this. Has Trump conquered Silicon Valley? Or did Silicon Valley conquer Trumpism? Has the revolution conquered the system, or has the system conquered the revolution? When you see that crossover, that is the only question that matters. Why, oh why, are these Silicon Valley oligarchs who 4 years ago put $300 million behind get out the vote in Democrat areas, who 4 years ago banned Trump from Facebook and YouTube, who 1 year ago hosted Ron DeSantis's presidential announcement on Twitter Spaces, did those people have a change of heart because they realized the goodness of Trump's intentions, because they realized the truth of the MAGA movement? Is that why they were there and are now here? Or is it that they realized what they didn't know then, or what they weren't confident in back then, is that Trump will now dutifully serve their financial and political interests? And their interests are this. As they build supercomputers, as they acquire GPUs and CPUs, and as they build their data centers to power AI, which they believe will be transformative for mankind, they're going to need energy. They're going to need IT workers, both of which will be imported under Trump by drilling and by stapling green cards to diplomas or bringing in a ton of people from India. Those are their financial interests, and they will be served under Trump. Moreover, Their companies are increasingly under scrutiny from the federal government in the form of antitrust and in the form of regulation surrounding energy, artificial intelligence, specifically safety with AI, if we're going to put brakes on what could be a superhuman intelligence. Those are two other interests served by Trump. And so immigration is really just one slice of the pie. Immigration is really just one issue about a much broader subject. And that subject is this. When we talk about what we're doing here, when we talk about the MAGA movement, what we're doing, we can no longer ignore the deep and inextricable relationship between capitalism, between technology, neoliberalism, and the media. We can no longer ignore that all of these things are contingent upon one another. They are all enforcing and accelerating one another. We will not reverse one without reversing all the others. What I am saying is this. Can we fight immigration without fighting the unquenchable commodification, the unquenchable thirst, framing of super wealthy corporations advancing technology, using the media to control our democratic government, and opening up our borders to labor and trade? Can we stop immigration without addressing everything else? Can we reverse immigration without addressing the structural reasons, the structural incentives, which is why we have immigration? There are a lot of people right now, specifically in Europe, that believe that if we just elect the right party, if we just elect the Republicans, if we just elect AFD or Reform or Le Pen or Meloni, if we just elect the right party and our guys get in there and we're going to infiltrate, and if we just keep telling people our opinions on the social media, we're going to get the government to stop immigration. Well, this is just really a child's understanding of politics. This is a high schooler's understanding of what is going on. Pay attention. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who is at the forefront of the emergent technologies, the transformative emergent technologies. We're not talking any longer about internet. We're not talking about smartphones. We're talking about electric cars, AI, satellites for the next generation of warfare. It is this individual who has accumulated the fortune, the $500 billion. It is this individual that is shaping the government using his capital. It is this individual who has captured the regime through media, through super PACs, through contributions, and it is his industry, his businesses, these technologies, which is driving the demand for more labor, more immigration, which is driving globalization, accelerating it to a pace that we haven't seen in 30 years, in spite of the success of Trump's movement, in spite of the success of an anti-globalization movement. If that doesn't tell you, at the minimum, the problem, if not the solution, you're not paying attention. So these are the things that we must consider very carefully in the next 4 years. We have to evolve beyond dressing up in all black and screaming about how white people aren't treated fairly. White people. It's true. It's all true. But we have got to get a lot smarter and stop getting outmaneuvered and think structurally rather than merely in terms of recognizing and observing the trends and voicing our earnest opposition to them. That is how we have to think going forward. We have to be a little smarter than your average white nationalist. We have to be a little smarter than your average dissident right-winger or infiltrator or whoever. We have to think deeply about what is taking place. And what is taking place is a techno-libertarian takeover This is something that was written about by Jacques Ellul, by Marshall McLuhan, by Heidegger, by Spengler, by Evola. Technology is the central question, not ideology. Technology itself has become the ideology. Technology in itself is what is insistent. Not right wing, not left wing, but technology and the systems that fortify technology. And that is how we have to think moving forward, because that is clearly the operative element in politics, in society, in our government, and it's ideology, effective accelerationism, and the proponents that are now entering government. So that is a huge issue, and that's something that's a very big topic, and we're going to be exploring that in this Trump second term throughout this administration. But that's really just one thing. I spoke a little bit too much and too long about that, but it is extremely critical. That is maybe the most critical issue of our time, and that is something that if you want to be serious, you need to start understanding. If you don't know who Andreessen Horowitz is or what they do, you need to learn. If you don't know what effective accelerationism is, you need to learn. If you don't know who Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin are, you need to learn. And that is something that I am going to help people understand over the course of this year. That's going to be my project. We have to get off of some of the basic talking points, the National Socialist LARPing, and get into understanding Y Combinator, PayPal Mafia, understanding artificial intelligence, the role it will play, the next generation technologies, their relationship to the intelligence community, and how they operate, if we're going to offer any kind of effective counter or pushback. And that's sort of my outline for where I'm at and what I'm thinking for the next 4 years. But there are some other things we're going to get into. That's only one. So that was a major row that happened in December between, again, Elon Musk and the base. By the way, it just sets up part two. Another tech oligarch, or I should just say another oligarch, pushing neoliberalism, which is this endless immigration, at odds with a nativist populist base that opposes it on cultural and identity grounds. The other big issue that took place during the transition is the Gaza ceasefire deal. I don't have as much to say about it, but I will say this. This is another issue which sets up the next 4 years. This is another big topic, so strap yourself in. I said throughout the 2024 election, and I believe this is obvious, and this is true, that Donald Trump may not have won the election if not for the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. It was the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, which drove many of those aforementioned Silicon Valley oligarchs into the Republican Party. I'm talking specifically about somebody like Jacob Hellberg, who is now working inside the Trump administration, young, Jewish, with an affinity for Israel, who works at a very high level and extremely connected in the Silicon Valley little tech world. He was a lifelong Democrat, and then after October 7th became a Republican because he is a Jew with loyalty to Israel and knows that the Republicans will give Israel what they need. He is not alone. Many other oligarchs did exactly the same thing. And this drove money and influence and connections, and I would imagine even favorable media coverage for Trump in the buildup to the 2024 election. I think it's a big reason why suddenly Trump is mainstream and acceptable. A big reason why there is a push against wokeism, DEI, leftism on the campus is because all of those things were the bastion of pro-Palestine sentiment in the aftermath of October 7th. And many of the elite people in our society who are Jewish, who were shocked by what they saw on October 7th, decided that all of those things had gone too far when they harbored sympathy for the heinous attack on their homeland. And it's not difficult to see this calculation. I've seen it over and over and over again. Many liberal Jews who will say, after October 7th, I realized DEI went too far. They sympathize with terrorists. They sympathize with Hamas and radicals. And they're on the campus. They hate Jews. Stop me if you've heard this before. And so this is given a very specific flavor and character to the incoming Trump administration. Many of the donors gave vast sums of money to Trump, just like the Silicon Valley donors gave money to Trump ostensibly for AI and energy and regulation and other things. Many Jewish elites and many pro-Israel elites gave Trump money and gave Trump support because of what Trump promised to them in the realm of diplomacy in the Middle East. And we recognized that going in, that right out of the gate, Trump was going to expedite weapons to Israel, which he has already done. That Trump would do other things, which we will discuss later, that Trump has already done for Israel. But in particular, what Israel confronted after October 7th was not just Hamas in Gaza, but as I said, throughout that conflict, Israel is also confronting a number of other adversaries. Chief among them, and backing the rest of them, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Iran remains Israel's only and number one adversary, their sole competitor for regional dominance in the Middle East. It is Iran and Israel, which are the two loci and centers of power in the region, with influence that extends truly across the entire Middle East region. Israel with its allies in Jordan, Egypt, and the Gulf, in Turkey, in Azerbaijan, in Kurdistan, and Iran with its allies previously in the Assad regime among the Shiite militias in Iraq, in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Shiite minorities and majorities in the Gulf states and other countries, and Saudi's eastern province. This was the table, how it was set up in 2023. And what Israel has embarked on since then is a systematic campaign to attack and roll back Iran's influence, starting with Gaza and the militant group Hamas, then expanding into Lebanon against Hezbollah. And then, as we saw in the closing weeks of 2024, in Syria, where the Assad regime was deposed by an Islamist group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was previously allied with al-Qaeda and ISIS, which allowed Israel to destroy all of Syria's air defenses. And what has happened in a very short window of time recently, what has changed the game is the following. From October 7, 2023, until October 2024, Israel was chiefly fighting Hamas, that first phase, the first wing of their conflict. Around September and October 2024, they pivoted to Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is their true imminent threat on their border. Not Hamas in Gaza, which is ill-equipped and does not have a lot of fighters and soldiers, but Hezbollah, which has a vast depot of missiles and about 100,000 fighters who are trained and who operate professionally in the field like normal military. After Hezbollah was defeated, Syria fell, and this is a relatively recent development, which is still developing, actually. It's still not even settled or final. But the toppling of the Assad regime in December allowed for Israel to bomb Syria's navy, its air defenses, and its air force, leaving Syrian airspace completely open and Syria vulnerable. And the situation that we are in right now is an unprecedented window of time, which will not repeat and which will close soon, which is that Israel has an opportunity to launch a strike on Iran directly. Their chief rival, the root of all of their problems, the chief sponsor of all of their adversaries on their borders. For the first time in 45 years. With Hezbollah disabled, with Hamas temporarily defeated, with the Assad regime toppled and its air defenses destroyed, there is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And now with Trump in office, who is sympathetic to Israel, for Israel to launch unilaterally an airstrike on Iran, unaided by the United States, to attack the Iranian regime, its air defenses, and maybe most importantly, its nuclear complex, which is spread out across a number of cities, specifically in Fordow, Natanz, Iraq, and Isfahan. It's an unprecedented opportunity, which, by the way, I told you from the very beginning, this was Israel's ultimate goal: to knock Iran out of the equation, to disable them, to pursue regime change, to set back their nuclear program so that Iran would be suppressed in its opposition to Israel's quest for regional dominance and hegemony. And the election of Donald Trump was a quintessential part of that plan. What we saw in the past week is a ceasefire deal, the first phase of a three-phase ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. It went into effect yesterday, one day before the inauguration. It would not have gone into effect without the Trump administration and its negotiator, Steve Witkoff, who made a last-minute trip to Israel and allegedly pressured Netanyahu to come to the table and implement a deal which he had not agreed to for the past 15 or 16 months. And everybody celebrated this as a huge win. And even people that disagreed and criticized me throughout the election hailed this as a major accomplishment. They said all the Trump critics prophesized that Trump would entrench Israel in Gaza, that Trump would bolster Israel's war and genocide in Gaza. And yet here he is, a day before the inauguration, apparently ending the war in Gaza. Just goes to show. But by no means is this what has taken place. What was agreed to last week was the first phase of a three-phase deal, which includes a 42-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from certain parts of Gaza, and a prisoner swap. 33 hostages from Hamas in exchange for over 100 prisoners from Israel. The second and third phase do not have concrete details, and although agreed to in principle, have not been agreed to in practice. And when those 42 days expire, it is actually an open question as to whether Israel will uphold and continue to pursue diplomacy in the second and third phase of the deal. Moreover, Netanyahu and Trump himself, as of today in the signing ceremony, have all but admitted they fully expect Israel to carry on the fighting, and maybe there was even an implicit guarantee or agreement made before the inauguration to support the continuation of hostilities after the first phase of the deal. So I don't believe that the full deal will be implemented. Maybe the first phase of the deal won't even be completed. Either way, what this points to, if not more fighting in Gaza, is a strategic truce for Israel to pursue its much bigger objective, its much more ambitious objective, which I said throughout the campaign and since October 7th was not only Israel's primary goal, but also what they sought out of a Trump presidency, which is an historic, unprecedented strike on Iran's nuclear complex and potentially a decapitation strike on the Iranian regime. We are not talking about Gaza, which is destroyed. We're not talking about Gaza, which is a done deal. They killed 100,000 people. They destroyed 60% of the buildings. They decapitated the Hamas leadership and killed 24 out of 26 of its battalions. They have completely blockaded the Strip. They control every checkpoint into and out of it. They control 18% of the territory in a buffer zone they've established on the border. They have bisected the Strip and the Netzarim corridor. They control the Philadelphia corridor, which is contrary to the Camp David Accords. It is over. It is a done deal. The time for a ceasefire was a year ago. Since then, Hamas has been defeated. Hezbollah has been paralyzed. Assad has been toppled, and a Sunni Islamist government has taken its place. The situation is different. And now we are looking down the barrel of what Israel has always wanted and what they supported Trump to secure, which is the true historical inflection point in that region, the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's why my rallying cry throughout the election was not ceasefire. It was no war with Iran. It was not make a deal with Hamas. It was no war with Iran. It was not think of the kids. Think about this. It wasn't that. It was no war with Iran. No regime change. And this sets up the next 4 years. If Trump was able to put Netanyahu under pressure to make a temporary deal, I got a news flash for you. Biden did this a year ago. In December 2023, the final week of November, the first week of December 2023, Netanyahu implemented a temporary ceasefire until he broke it. And negotiations went on throughout 2024, and they came very close many times. They agreed to a first phase, although not a second or a third. And each time the negotiations fell apart, often because Netanyahu deliberately sabotaged them. Here we are again. The deal has entered its first day. We're 1 day into the deal. Now the question is, with all the neocons inside Trump's administration, with the considerable amount of Israel money that went behind Trump in the election, how we are compromised in our government by Israel, can Trump resist Israel indefinitely? Can Trump pressure Israel indefinitely? And if push comes to shove, if Israel limits Trump's options by taking bold and unilateral action, tying Trump's hands by changing circumstances, by bombing Iran without his permission, will Trump stand up to them? It is technically an open-ended question, but I think we all know that it is not. I think we all know that it is a very much settled and resolved question. And people are talking about Trump will pressure Netanyahu. Trump will send his envoy and flex on the Israeli government. That is until Israel takes bold action by themselves without notifying us, in contravention of our interests, disobeying our commands, to force the United States into a corner. They've done it before. Ever heard of 9/11? Ever heard of Israel strikes in Iraq in 1981, in Syria in 2007? It strikes on Iran last year. It's what they do, folks. It's what they do. So that's the other challenge that is set up. And these are the two things, by the way. These are two things that we've seen during the transition. They're the two things I talked about during the election. These are the two things that will define the next 4 years. These are, if we were to analyze and then locate the two tensions between what the Trump movement promises in spirit and what it is likely to deliver in practice by its personnel, by its government, which is paid for by billionaires, these are those two issues. What stands in the way of American sovereignty on immigration and foreign policy, specifically as it pertains to Israel? It is money. It is Silicon Valley money. It is the Israel lobby money. And these are the two issues that happened during the transition that set up the next 4 years under Trump. But that's that. This show is just getting started. Those are just two items that happened during the transition. I want to now talk about the executive orders. So that is the build up into, I apologize if this is super tedious. I hope you're enjoying this. But there is a lot of ground to cover, and I didn't get to talk about it because I was away because of circumstances outside my control. So that is the transition, but I want to now talk about the inauguration and the executive orders today. So this is the big day when the rubber meets the road. All of the promises of the campaign, all of the rhetoric, all of the speculation about what we're going to get, we now get to see. Starting today with the executive orders and then tomorrow and the day after, we are now going to realize what the Trump movement is really about in 2024. And there have been a lot of ideas about what we're going to get. We all recognize that Trump's first term had major shortcomings and major failures. The first Trump administration did not build a border wall. The first Trump administration did not get illegal immigration under control or reduce immigration on net. The first Trump administration did not change the free trade paradigm fundamentally. The first Trump administration did not end a single war. It actually kept them going in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It actually paved the way for a war in Ukraine by furnishing Kiev with lethal aid, among other things. And we recognize that the first Trump administration in many ways failed because of incompetent leadership. Because Trump appointed the wrong personnel who were not aligned with his vision, and he did not realize or change course until it was far too late, and allowed these terrible personnel, at least that's the narrative, to carry on the status quo from previous governments, even though Trump had apparently or nominally won the victory. So the idea in the intervening 4 years goes something like this. Trump has learned from his mistakes. Trump is running again with a vengeance and a mind towards taking over government to finish the job or punish his enemies. That Trump has won a victory in the hearts and minds of the people. He is mainstream now because people have realized they were wrong and he was right, and he now has an historic mandate, and that will translate into policy change. These are the various sunny appraisals of the Trump administration. And I will admit, I said throughout 2024, and I think it's true still, I think the Trump administration is going to have better government, better administration. The government will be more efficacious. I think conditions in the country will improve. The economy will get better. The world will be more peaceful. There will be more law and order in the country. The border will be more secure. America's industry, and specifically its strategically important industries, its advanced manufacturing, will be fortified. I think all of that is true. At the same time, I think that on critical issues, we are not making enough progress, specifically the demographic change and the issue of American sovereignty. I think that realistically, the big structural issue of our time, like I said moments ago, is fighting for national independence and for the sovereignty of our government from money, from technology, from foreign governments, from that regulatory capture. And that is ultimately what Make America Great Again and America First means. It means subordinating the demands of a technological industrial system to the needs of the people. The government should not only not serve foreign governments before its own people, it should also not serve a mechanistic technological system, an ideological economic system before its own people. And that's maybe a subtle but a more profound way to put it. America First means the well-being of Americans first, before the demands of capital, before the demands of the GDP and the economy and globalization and the latest technology. Are we achieving that with a Trump administration? It's actually the opposite. It seems that the Trump administration is a vehicle for foreign governments. It is a vehicle for capital. It is a vehicle for technology, for all of their interests to dominate the well-being of Americans. And Americans will benefit as a byproduct, but they're clearly not being put first. And so now today, we get to see that put to the test. Who is winning out? Are the donors who serve the system, who serve foreign governments winning, or are the people winning? And today we got to see that with executive orders, and we'll talk about some of them. So as of right now, we actually don't know the content of the executive orders. At least we don't know the details. We don't know how many have been passed, but we have a general idea of what is in them and what policy areas they address. Trump passed a lot of executive orders today, immediately after his inauguration at the Capital One Arena and then in the White House. And we're going to go over them right now. And I have to say, it's a mixed bag. There are some that I like, some that I'm not impressed with. But these are really going to set the tone for the next 100 days and for the next 4 years. And these are the executive orders. This is from CBS. It says, quote, President Donald Trump signed roughly 200 executive actions, memoranda, and proclamations on his first day in office, undoing Biden administration mandates and implementing his America First policies. On cabinet appointments, he signed his first documents at the Capitol soon after the inauguration, establishing cabinet and sub-cabinet appointments, acting leaders of departments and agencies, and a proclamation that flags are to be flown at full staff on inauguration days. And this stuff is really formal. The next big executive order was clemency for January 6th offenders and defendants. Once he arrived at the Oval Office after 7 p.m., the first executive order Mr. Trump signed at the White House was a full and complete pardon for about 1,500 people involved in the January 6th Capitol assault. A handful of cases won't receive a full pardon, at least for now, pending review, although he commuted the sentences of over a dozen members of far-right Oath Keepers, several of whom had received the stiffest sentences. This is pretty big, and I have to commend Trump fully and unequivocally and completely. I am surprised at this, and I was wrong about this. I fully anticipated, based on what Trump had been saying, although I don't think I made a very concrete prediction, but I was expecting the worst. I anticipated that Trump would leave hundreds, potentially hundreds, or at least 100 of the Capitol rioters in the cold without a pardon, because I believed it would be politically inexpedient and that his advisors would counsel him not to pardon violent offenders or people who had meleeed with the police. And many people were charged for violent crimes that did not actually commit any acts of violence at all. They were just caught up in this process where the DOJ was legitimately too aggressive and arguably corrupt and throwing the book at people with these extraordinary prosecutions to send a message more than anything else. And so I was legitimately and pleasantly surprised that Trump pardoned nearly every single protester, all but 14. And we don't know the details about those cases, which ones that he did not pardon, but this is far more than I thought he would. It's nearly all of them. And the ones that received significant sentences had the sentences reduced or commuted. And I think that is a true victory. So my congratulations to the president and to everybody that was pardoned, to T.R. Sarter, to Christian Secor, even to Baked Alaska, who I don't consider a friend anymore, and not to those people that called in a bomb threat at my rally who were charged. I think it's actually unfortunate that they were pardoned. They should be in jail for other things. But for everybody that was pardoned, it is a true and a heartfelt congratulations. God bless you. That was a truly loyal moment, and actually I think sets up the administration in a positive way. I think that sends a message that Trump did not forget his most loyal supporters. He did deliver for them. This is probably not the most popular first action that he could take, but he followed through and he did it. I believe it was too late. He should have done it in January 4 years ago, but it's better late than never, and it still came at a cost, and it shows that he didn't leave anybody behind. So God bless President Trump for that. I truly congratulate him and everybody that was pardoned for that. It's a remarkable day. And especially for me, I obviously didn't get charged, although they considered charging me, and I went through a lot of other problems. A lot of people say I got off scot-free. I really did not, believe me. For everybody that was involved on that day and the aftermath, it was an undescribably dreadful feeling of helplessness, that the government was absolutely crushing us. They have unlimited resources. There is no transparency. There is no recourse. The only way to fight back is to spend extraordinary amounts of money, which does not guarantee you anything. They can see everything. They were not even subpoenaing records. Companies were volunteering records. Bank of America, telecom companies were volunteering records. Geolocation was being used. They brought in thousands of judges and agents so that they could charge thousands of people, really at their discretion. And the full weight, not only of the federal government, but really all of elite society came crashing down on a few thousand Trump supporters, a few thousand. I wouldn't even call them political extremists, but really just political activists, to utterly destroy and squash them, to send a message to the whole world and to the country about the seat of our government. And you can understand why they did it, but it was quite literally a reign of terror. That was the purpose of it. It's not an exaggeration. It's not a misnomer. That is literally, by definition, what it was. It was a reign of terror. And they said as much. One of the prosecutors leading the charge in the DOJ said in an interview shortly after the inauguration 4 years ago that they were doing shock and awe, arresting e-celebrities, arresting internet personalities to scare people not to go to the inauguration. It was, by definition, a political terror. It was a political repression. It was a political persecution. And it was carried out in such a way, baked in to the prosecutions, to scare people to not exercise their civil rights. That was the purpose of it. It was intentional. It was by design. And that is what they did. It was a political terror in America like we haven't seen really since 9/11 against Muslims. It was turned inwardly. All these surveillance, law enforcement, and other tools that were built up over the last 30 years because of the war on terror were turned inwardly, away from the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and towards Breitbart and like Facebook groups, QAnon, Trump supporters, to surveil, monitor, and then utterly crush them and destroy their fucking lives. And they did it. They did it to almost 2,000 people. They did it to me. Even people that they did not charge, they still destroyed their lives. I was banned from everything. I lost my income for years. My friends turned against me because I became radioactive. They thought I would be charged. I had to pay nearly $250,000 in legal fees. I was put on a no-fly list for a year, which was devastating. They froze all my money for half a year, which was devastating. They forced a subpoena on me, which was very costly and also made me further radioactive. Everybody knows my reputation. Who wants to talk to me if Congress is going to subpoena all my text messages? If you're texting me and we're being low-key, oh, don't tell anybody I'm a groyper. And then Congress says, give us all your texts, which, by the way, I never turned over. I didn't give them a fucking thing. But imagine if that's the message that goes out. Oh, all this guy's text messages are going to be turned over to the Democrats in Congress. I mean, it's terrible and it's brutal. And it's not to say, look, obviously the people that got charged had it worse, because believe me, lawfare is a whole other ordeal. There's nothing like it, and you don't know what it's like until you've been subjected to it. You have no idea. Lawfare itself is the punishment. The court dates, the legal fees, the lawyers, the uncertainty about sentencing, that's part of the punishment. And God bless the people that went through that. They may have been exonerated, they may have been pardoned, but nothing will take back the heartache and the despair and the anguish and the personal destruction of livelihoods because of this. I mean, it's unbelievable. And there really should be accountability. It should go further. But at the minimum, God bless Trump that he put an end to the nightmare. He put an end to the madness because, like I said, as someone who is a subject of a lot of this stuff, if not an actual charge, it was an unbelievable terror. And nobody who was not involved on that day really understands the sinking feeling in the months and years after that. It's just, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Scratch that. I would actually wish it on my worst enemies, but knowing the gravity of it, absolutely knowing the gravity of it, I would wish it on some of them, but it's pretty brutal. So God bless Trump for that. Honestly, I was surprised, and I'm pleasantly surprised. So God bless Trump. We're going to go through some of the other ones. The next executive order was a TikTok executive order extending the implementation of the ban. Mr. Trump signed an executive order on Monday night telling the Justice Department not to enforce for 75 days a law that effectively bans TikTok. It was supposed to go into effect a day ago. It is unclear what legal authority the president has to delay the bipartisan law, which was upheld by the Supreme Court 3 days ago. The divest or ban law permitted the president to delay its implementation by 90 days if a sale was in progress by January 19th. So the TikTok ban, the law says it had 200 and some days from the time of passage until implementation that TikTok would be prohibited from being accessed in the United States with a prohibitive fine unless it was sold to an American company. Now, they say this is because of a national security threat posed by Chinese surveillance, because TikTok is owned by parent company ByteDance, which is headquartered in China. And the premise is that if it's a Chinese company, then Beijing can at any time, under the weight of law, with the force of law, request the data from ByteDance from TikTok users in the United States and effectively spy on the mobile devices and the software of over 100 million TikTok users in America. So they say it has to go, or you have to sell it to an American company to mitigate that threat. Well, TikTok refuses to sell, and it, as of January 19th, it was banned and then resuscitated pending a potential sale. This executive order suspends the implementation of the ban for 75 days, and presumably Trump will look for a buyer or negotiate with TikTok itself to force a sale of some or all of the company or find some other remedy to keep it active in the United States. Now, I don't know how much of a win this really is, because they will ban TikTok if they don't sell it to an American company. If they sell it to an American company, this is actually not good for us. Because understand, all of the American social media companies, in the same way that a Chinese social media company can be spied on by the Chinese government, all the American social media companies can be spied on by the U.S. and Israeli government. So I'm not sure how much of an improvement that actually is. For example, X is owned by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a defense contractor. He contracts with the government, with the military. When the CEO of Telegram was arrested in France, he turned over millions of users' data, which has fallen into the hands of the United States government. When a foreign social platform falls into the custody or the ownership of an American company or an American jurisdiction or a country with an extradition treaty, that just becomes property of the CIA and the FBI. So we're going to keep TikTok, but it's going to be run by Mark Andreessen. I don't know if that's actually a great benefit, but anyway, so I don't know how I feel about that. The next executive order is a order for federal workers to return to in-person full-time work. Okay, I mean, yeah, that'll make the government run more smoothly, probably. Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. We're in, we're out. We went in under Obama. We went out under Trump. We went in under Biden. We're out under Trump. It's not binding anyway, so this is not really a big deal. He withdrew us from the World Health Organization, which was instrumental in creating the COVID guidance. I don't know how much of a benefit this is, considering that Trump worked hand in glove with the WHO when he was president during the pandemic. So again, I mean, leaving a supranational organization, okay. The final order he signed at the Capital One Arena was directed at aiming what Trump has called the weaponization of government by the Biden administration against his political adversaries, although we don't really know what it does. Now for the good stuff on immigration. Trump began invoking presidential powers to launch a sweeping crackdown on immigration, tasking the military with border enforcement, designating cartels and gangs as terrorist groups, shutting down asylum and refugee admissions, which would be catch and release. The president declared a national emergency at the southern border and ordered the Defense Department to more heavily involve military resources there. He is instructing officials to start construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, relaunching a multi-billion-dollar project that he championed during his first term in office, where about 455 miles of barrier were built along the southwest border between 2017 and January 2021. So this is expected, but it's good. He's basically re-implementing the suite of executive orders that he had implemented in the final 2 years of his last presidency. Starting in June 2019, Trump started to put together a regime of executive orders that included the migrant protection protocols, otherwise known as Remain in Mexico, among other policies to prevent migrants from coming in. And the dirty secret about the border is that illegals aren't sneaking in, they're being let in. A lot of people don't know that. When people think about the southern border, they think about people climbing a fence or swimming around. That's not how they're getting in. The vast majority of them are categorized as apprehensions, meaning that border security actually intercedes them. They collect them at the border. The illegals surrender at a port of entry. They surrender to law enforcement. That's how they get in. You'd think that's the last thing they'd want to do. If they show up and meet a border guard, then they're going to get thwarted from entering. It's the opposite. They deliberately show up where the border guards are because the border guards will collect them, register their asylum claim. They read a script, claim political asylum. We legally can't turn them away. And because we cannot detain them at the border while we adjudicate whether their asylum claim is legitimate, we release them into the country. And that was the scandal of this Customs and Border app, this CBP-1 app that was disabled today. Illegal immigrants could schedule an appointment at a border crossing. They could, like you schedule an appointment at the dentist. I'm going to show up at 2 p.m., get my teeth cleaned. They would show up. They would schedule an appointment at a port of entry at the southern border. I'd like to come into the United States illegally. I'm thinking like 3 o'clock on Wednesday. And this is how it's done. So what Trump did in 2019 and 2020 was implement a number of executive orders which prevented them from actually getting on this side of the border. We'll take your asylum claim, but instead of being brought into the interior of the United States while we adjudicate it, and there's a backlog of millions and we can't store you at the border, so we'll just let you go to New York, we're going to keep you in Mexico instead. And we're not going to take your claims. We're not going to take your refugee claim. We're going to change how that all works, and we're going to keep you on this side of the border while we construct a physical barrier. And that did reduce illegal immigration significantly. Not completely, but significantly. So this is very good. It was to be expected, but this is very good. In terms of the military, I will tell you, when they say they're deploying the military to the border, the military cannot enforce the border. So the military cannot do interior removals. They cannot reject people at the border. The military cannot perform a border patrol or a interior removal role. What they can do is build infrastructure. So the military can engage in engineering projects like building facilities or maybe the wall. But I hate to tell you, they will not be repelling illegals, just so you understand. But he went further. Trump moved to dismantle the longstanding interpretation of the 14th Amendment, signing an order for federal agencies to deny birthright citizenship to children of parents who are unauthorized immigrants or temporary visa holders. The U.S. government has long interpreted the 14th Amendment of the Constitution as granting a right of citizenship for those born on American soil, regardless of their parents' immigration status. This is good, but you know, this is one of those things that it's kind of like the first bullshit order that goes out. The 14th Amendment, although it should be reinterpreted, is very clear that anyone born on the land becomes a citizen. It does not say they have to be legal. It does not say, it's very clear. The text of the amendment is very clear. You're born on the land, you're a citizen. So this will be challenged in the courts. It won't even be implemented in the meantime, and it will be overturned. So I think there's a very, very slim and low chance that this will result in the end of birthright citizenship. On some level, is there a knock-on effect that people get talking about this issue? Maybe, but no one's going to do anything about it. Congress won't act. There won't be an amendment to the Constitution, which would be extraordinary. This is, they're pissing this away. This is nothing. So am I against them signing it? No, but it's not going to do anything. And I wish they would have done more on this, because they probably could have summoned the political will to repeal this. Maybe. They maybe could have summoned some sort of political will to change this in Congress or in the Constitution. Trump could have appointed justices that would have committed to doing that, but it's not going to happen. So this is really nothing. He changed an executive order to give the death penalty to illegal immigrants who murdered law enforcement officers. This is, okay, but this is like, whatever. It's not like they're not arresting people that kill police, except in Chicago maybe, but okay, they're going to kill the people that kill police. That's good. That's a good thing, but it doesn't really transform immigration. On the economy, Mr. Trump's executive orders related to energy production and the economy are geared towards cutting regulations criticized as red tape. His orders include declaring a national emergency related to energy cost and putting an end to the electric vehicle mandate. He also signed an executive order focused specifically on Alaskan economic and energy production. The state and its natural resources are critical to national security, and the next administration is trying to boost its LNG, liquefied natural gas production, for both export and domestic use. The new president also signed a presidential memorandum on inflation, directing the government to focus on bringing down rising costs. Again, that's just like, whatever. Hey, tell the government to make eggs cheaper. I don't think it really works like that. They already doubled the money supply, so cat's out of the bag. Energy cost is already going down. So, and then on gender and diversity, Trump addressed on his first day related to gender wokeness and programs related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. He made it a policy of the federal government to recognize two sexes that cannot be changed, male and female based. Now it is the law of the land that there are only two genders. Liberals eat shit. Mr. Trump also directed the Office of Management and Budget to coordinate with agencies to terminate all mandates, policies, and programs that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. The executive order includes a review of facilities that have been renamed as part of DEI initiatives. So, taken together, unfortunately, a lot of these executive orders don't appear to be extremely meaningful at first glance. I mean, you could throw out a lot of these right out of the gate. The DEI, two gender stuff, I mean, like, whatever, okay? I just want the border shut down. It's good. Don't get me wrong. Do I support it? Yes. Is it good? Yes. But does this ultimately reverse course of society? Gay marriage is here to stay. Tolerance and normalcy of homosexuality, divorce, transgenderism. It's all here to stay. Are we going to take away the right of people to cut their penis off? No. There's still going to be transgenders. Caitlyn Jenner was at Mar-a-Lago the day after the election. So does this really fundamentally change anything? Not really. On the economy, they're opening up drilling. It will bring energy costs down. I'd probably support this. But again, does this really transform structurally the economy? No, this does not change the fundamental equation on debt, on currency, on jobs, on trade. It's good for the economy, but okay. The death penalty for illegals that kill law enforcement, another good thing, but doesn't really change immigration. Birthright citizenship going nowhere. The executive order on weaponization of the government. Look, Biden's out of office. Does this change anything structurally? I don't think so. And Trump is in office anyway. I think that's done regardless. Pulling out of the WHO Paris Climate Agreement, like whatever. Federal workers returning to work. Okay, good for them. TikTok being bought by Andreessen Horowitz or whatever. Okay, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. To me, the two meaningful executive orders are these. Clemency for January 6 protesters and securing the border. Those are the two good things. The rest of it, I could really take it or leave it. He will close the border, and we'll see the numbers very quickly. We'll see what the border apprehensions look like in January and February, and we'll see if it's working, so we'll be able to tell. But I think that is one of the things that is going to go very well under the Trump administration. I'd be surprised if it didn't. And that's a good thing. I support that. And like I said, giving clemency to the January 6 protesters is extremely loyal, and it's a personal relief. It's a relief for the conscience of the country. But I have to say, I'm a little disappointed because the message that we were given today is that a golden age was starting, a flurry of executive action to start a transformative epoch in the history of mankind in America. That didn't happen. Okay, that didn't happen. Nothing was passed today with trade, okay? No tariffs, nothing on trade. Nothing was passed today on the wars. Nothing on Syria, on Iraq, nothing. On Ukraine, Ukraine war still goes on. Today he said at the signing ceremony, he said that he cannot end the war in Gaza. It's up to them, okay? And immigration, it's really unchanged. There's nothing on deportations, nothing on legal immigration. So, I mean, we could talk about what we got, and what we got is sort of like stocking stuffers. It's sort of like, you know how on Christmas your parents get you like an iPod and then they get you a bunch of bullshit? Here's your iPod, and then here's like a bunch of chocolate Santas, and here's some M&Ms, and, you know, here's a $5 McDonald's gift card. I'm not dissing Christmas. I love you, Mom and Dad. I love my parents. But it's like we all know that is the economy of presents. That is the economy of presents. You get an iPod and then a bunch of crap. You get a Nintendo Switch and a bunch of crap. You get a FX lightsaber from Sharper Image and you get a bunch of crap. That is just how it goes. And that's how it feels today. We got the January 6 commutations and pardons. We got the border security. And then we got a bunch of, we're pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Great. Okay, great. Little chocolate. Nom, nom, nom. Now what? How about we shut down the fucking border? How about we deport 30 million people? How about now we bring the troops home? Tariffs on anybody? Invade Greenland? Invade somebody? Stop invading Ukraine? Hello? Where's the rest of the presents? This is ridiculous. So what matters with the executive order, it's not just what we got, it's what we didn't got. We got a lot of fluff. And this gives me a bad feeling because this tells you it's more of the same. This was the first administration. A lot of signing, a lot of fanfare. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Do it in an arena, do it in the White House, do it on a train, do it on a plane, pass something about this and that. Okay, but it's not actually changing anything. It's this big spectacle and busy work. But to pull us out of the WHO, I'm sorry, does anyone really care? Except for, I'm sure some people care, all these, vaccine people. Oh, and good. I mean, it's a good thing. I don't oppose it. But this is not the flurry of executive power, the coronation. That's President Trump to you. You have 0 days. Okay, but now today we get Paris Climate Agreement, WHO, federal workers come to work tomorrow. We're not going to ban TikTok for 2 months. So, again, today is the big day when we see whether the speculation about Trump's vengeance tour, his heel turn, having learned his lessons, all of that now is going to crash on the shore against the rocks of reality. And we're going to see what's really going on. And I continue to believe that the beneficiaries of this administration will be Silicon Valley and the state of Israel. There will not be structural change to immigration, to the economy, to trade, how we conduct our foreign policy, to any of it. I think we're going to escalate in Ukraine before we de-escalate. I think we're going to give everything that Israel needs, and we may see strikes on Iran, and the situation may get worse. I think immigration will remain high, if not from illegal sources, from legal sources. Here's what they're not signing an executive order on. They're not reclassifying federal employees to hire 50,000 people, which is something they said they'd do. They're not ending the war in Syria or Iraq, which is something they promised the first time. They didn't pass a single tariff when Trump promised a 15% across-the-board tariff on all imports, or a tariff on Canada and Mexico, or on China, which is what he promised during the transition. He's not reducing legal immigration. He's not signing an executive order to marshal the resources for mass deportations. So the executive branch reforms that would give him more power are not happening. Things on trade, things on foreign policy, and things on immigration are not happening. Why not? 4 years. 4 years they had to write this up. 4 years they had to find the personnel. 4 years they had to think about it. We get an executive order on the WHO? Fuck you. I mean, seriously. Now, I'm not going to totally sell and flip out because it's day one, but honest to God, what is the excuse? It reminds me of the transition. You had 4 years to find personnel, and they did this Mag Gates thing, and they did this thing with DEA, and they did this, and they didn't have people ready to go. We get Susie Wiles, we get Marco Rubio. It's terrible. So the transition told us what we were getting. Trump backing Elon Musk in the H-1B debacle told us what we were getting. John Thune and Mike Johnson controlling the Senate and the House, that told us what we were getting. And now the first day of executive orders, this is another preview of what we're getting. And it is not the national populist takeover of executive power that we were told, that Curtis Yarvin and all the, they talk such a big game. We're going to use power. We're going to wield state power. To do what? Import more Jeets and oil to power your AI god? I mean, because that seems to be the only thing they're going to do. But we'll wait and see. But we'll give them a chance and we'll watch. But honestly, I was not impressed. I thought the speech was okay thematically. It was basically a stump speech with some of the usual flowery language. There was some good stuff in there, but it was really another stump speech. And the executive orders were a big show. Nothing on trade, nothing on deportations, nothing about bringing the troops home. And during the signing ceremony, he said, I can't end the war in Gaza. At the same time, he ended the sanctions on the West Bank settlers. He eliminated any of the restrictions on foreign aid to Israel. And he took some other actions pertaining to that conflict. So I think it's very clear what we are going to get. And I'm not totally impressed. Now, the next 100 days, that is going to be the real question. Are we going to see the implementation of a tariff regime? That's a big question. We'll know. There's going to be a debt ceiling negotiation and possibly an agenda bill, which includes many things pertaining to immigration and other things that goes through the Congress. And we'll see what they use budget reconciliation on. That'll be a big test. How he treats the negotiations in Ukraine and the Middle East, whether we get an Iran strike in this very short window, that's another thing to watch for. And then whether there are massive raids carried out by ICE this week. We were told there'd be massive operations from ICE today in Chicago and New York. It didn't happen. Will it happen this week? I don't know. They said nationwide operations from coast to coast. Well, we'll see. So these are the things we're going to be watching and waiting to look for. We're going to watch for budget reconciliation. We're going to watch for debt ceiling in Congress. We're going to watch, obviously, for whether there will be brinksmanship against Russia, how he'll resolve that, what his first approach will be. And we'll see whether Israel will collapse the deal that was made last week, the ceasefire, whether they'll expand it to Iran. On the border, we're going to have to watch for whether border apprehensions go up or down or stay the same. We're going to have to watch and see if there's going to be massive ICE operations, if they even try. We'll have to wait and see in terms of cabinet personnel if there's going to be some reclassification of federal employees. And then ultimately, we'll have to wait and see for whether there will be a significant attempt at a trade regime, and that, I'm sure, will result from negotiations and meetings with the leaders of Canada, Mexico, the EU, and China. So this is our forecast for 100 days. Those are the things we're going to look for, and I will judge the administration as a success if there is progress made on those fronts. If at the end of 100 days, which is over 3 months, a little math there for you, if at the end of 100 days, border apprehensions go way down, if there's significant attempts being made at interior removals by ICE, if tariffs are going up, not being threatened, but going up, if there's no strike on Iran, if there's an end in sight for the war in Ukraine and it's not escalating rather than de-escalating, if there is a reclassification of employees, if there's an agenda bill that goes through Congress which contains real reforms, I will judge this administration as a success. It's a great sign. If most or all of those things aren't completed, it's over. It's a failure. And the thing is, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then we're going to take Super Chats because this has been a very long show already. I think we're at 2 hours, haven't even read Super Chats. Last thing I'm going to say is this about our 100 days here. We do not have as much time as you think we do. Trump is not running for re-election, which means he is a lame duck. When you can't run again, when you are barred by term limits, it means you are a lame duck. This is a lame duck presidency. In a year, they're going to start talking about the midterms. This is the slimmest majority for the House in 100 years. We have 220 votes in the House of Representatives. It's a majority of 218. Slimmest in 100 years. In the Senate, you have 4 rhinos that would not approve Matt Gaetz. You've got the senators from Kentucky and Utah. I think it's actually now John Thune and the senator from Utah, and then Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. We do not have a massive majority in the Senate. Midterms are in a year. When the midterm campaign starts, they're going to say, we can't do anything extraordinary. We can't do anything controversial. And they're already going to be thinking about 2028, a year, 2 years from now. So you think we have 4 years? We have a year. Realistically, we have 1 year. We have 2 bills, 2 budget reconciliation bills that can pass the Senate with a simple majority, but it doesn't even matter because the House, we barely have a simple majority. So we do not have as much time as you think. We can't count on Congress. We can't count on this whack Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett sucks. Kavanaugh sucks. They all suck. We can only count on aggressive, ambitious, unprecedented executive action, and we don't have a lot of time. So we will know by the end of this year if this administration is going to work or not, if it's going to be unprecedented change or not. And that is not an exaggeration because that's exactly how it went down the first time. Trump will not, and I could be wrong about this, it's still far out, but the odds are that Trump will not keep his majority in the House in the next cycle. He will lose the House. He barely won by the skin of his teeth this time. And it is rare that an incumbent party keeps control of the House or expands control of the House in the midterms. So he is on track to lose the House. And when he loses that, it's gridlock. Arguably, it already is. So if he can't get it done in the next 2 years, he will not get it done. If he can't get it done in the first year, they'll be thinking about the midterms a year from now. It will not happen. So what we need is aggressive, energetic, fast, executive reform immediately. If it doesn't come, don't count on it coming later. And that means it has to be moving immediately. There can be no time for delay. But based on what we saw on day 1, I don't feel super good. I'm not extremely optimistic. It's good stuff. The gender stuff is good. Pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords is good. Pulling out of some of the stuff, it's good. Killing people that kill cops, it's good. Or illegals that kill Border Patrol, that's good. The border security stuff is great. But it's really not enough. So we're going to be watching the next 100 days to see if there's progress. But that's going to be like a trimester. And if it's not done by the third one, if it's not done by the end of the year, I would be seriously skeptical about whether this administration will deliver real reform. So all this talk about golden age, it sounds great. Look, it's rhetoric. We've heard it all before. It's morning in America. Okay, we've heard all that before. This is why it now matters whether this is a revolution or not. If it's a revolution, that means Trump is going to seize power, use his mandate aggressively with the bully pulpit. He has the personal energy to see it through to the finish line and deliver radical reform. If it's not a revolution, don't count on anything changing. And it's clearly the latter.